Hey everyone, I'm Drew, the bearded heathen, and today I have a good friend of mine, Phillip Scroggin, with me on this episode. Uh, he and I marched together in college, and he responded to my atheist or agnostic video, saying that he'd like to have a sort of longer discussion on the topic with me, and I asked him if it was all right if we recorded it and put it up. So that's what we're going to be doing today. So without any further ado, let me turn it over to Phillip to kind of introduce himself, and then we'll get started.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Drew. It's awesome. This is I'm not a pro like you yet, but it's awesome to be able to have some really cool discussions. And yeah, I definitely enjoyed our days. Southern Pride, Marching Band, Georgia Southern, and I'm looking forward to having a cool dialogue. And I think that these videos of the Bearded Heathen have been a cool opportunity for me to kind of see some of the same stories play out as you were sharing your experience, and also talking about some cool stuff like you talked about categories in your most recent video. And so I think this would be a cool opportunity. I was hoping to be able to dialogue with you and just have a cool discussion, because I think that some similarities that everybody sees in their paths with yours, and I definitely am one of them.
Okay, awesome. Well, I think those that are watching that have seen some of my videos before know my position, especially if you watch my more recent one. I'm an atheist, but my guest here, Phillip, is a theist, and I'm kind of curious to see where exactly he falls on that spectrum. And, so if you could give us some more background there. I mean, I know very little, and I kind of wanted to explore this together. So, tell me a little bit more about your theism and kind of your background.
Yeah, so I mean, I can go into the basic story, which is pretty boring. Born and raised in the Bible Belt in the South. Both my parents are Christians, and I was raised in a Christian household, much like you, and kind of a sheltered household, very conscious of what I watched, what I read, who I hung out with. So I definitely grew up in that culture that's so familiar here in the Deep South. And still identify specifically as a Christian within theism. And kind of came into my own and had to go through my own journeys and get challenged and have some tough questions come across, like you in my formative years. So, it started a little bit in high school, got into college, and that's where, really being outside of the household, out of the nest, and really got some interesting questions and challenges, learned some new things, had to learn new perspectives, change my views on a wide variety of different things. And then my journey really continued even after college. Actually, my first job, believe it or not, some of the people I met there really influenced where I am today. But I kind of had a journey from I just believe what my parents believe to really having my own belief and my own reason for believing. But ultimately, I've kind of come out the other end of that, still claiming theism and more specifically, Christianity.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, one of the things, I grew up very similarly in a Christian household. Like you said, very conscious of what we watched, what we read, what we listened to. We were, in fact, one of the things is we weren't allowed to listen to any non-Christian music on Sundays, which was kind of interesting.
Lucky you, I wasn't allowed to listen to anything but Christian music anytime.
At all? Okay,
no,
wow.
No, it's fun. Well, when my parents got divorced when I was in middle school, that's when I was over at my dad's house. We would listen to like 95.5 I-95 and listen to some classic rock, but that was like my first foray into contemporary or secular music, whatever you want to call it. My mom especially, it was very like, I want y'all to listen to Christian music. So I think his radio came out in the late 90s and pretty much what I grew up on.
Huh. All right.
Yeah.
Well, interesting.
Yeah. So
I've
at least
never
you get to
known.
listen to other music some days of the week. So,
Yeah, yeah. We listen to a lot of oldies, a lot of Elvis,
yep.
Emmylou Harris,
There you go.
um, Beatles. Well, actually, not so much Beatles. I've listened to them a lot more
Hmm.
since college. But um, uh,
Well, that's cool. At
yeah,
least you
it's
got introduced to the oldies. Like, it's funny how, not to get too much off topic, but if you go to the oldies station, it's like 70s and 80s. Like, they don't even play. I remember when I was a kid, they were playing 50s and 60s. Like, it was
mhm,
consistently on the radio. So that's kind of cool.
mhm, yeah. Um, Yes, that was one of the things that I dealt with. Very minor inconvenience, really. I got away with listening to Lord of the Rings soundtracks on Sunday.
Um,
That was technically not Christian, but it was from a movie that was based on a book, the series that was written by a Christian. So
right, right.
that was as far as the stretch as I could make it.
Oh yeah.
Um, but yeah, and then in college, well, yeah, in high school, it just some kind of surprising things that I'd never thought about before. Like I'd never heard any of the other creation myths from other religions, and comparing those to the ones that I was familiar with, and just very minor things like that. And then in college, um, I was got a music degree, but one of the things that I was always really interested in was biology. Even before I was introduced to the theory of evolution, biology, outside of just that, always really fascinated me, like how cells work and um, all that kind of stuff. And then astronomy, always been
Hmm.
really big into, I mean, I like Star Wars and Star Trek and, you know,
So you
all
actually
the
like
nerdy stuff.
science, and like you actually like tried in high school in science, like
Yeah,
you actually cared for it. Wow.
yeah, I actually enjoyed it. It's weird. I think of science as kind of my hobby and
Mm.
music as my career. It's a little backwards from what I imagine most people choose for their career path. But
I
I
think you
enjoy
have
it.
something backwards there. Something is backwards. Yeah.
Something's a little different, I guess. But anyway, yeah. So I took an extra biology class than was necessary, and I took an extra astronomy class that I didn't need to take, just because I had some free credits to fill. Not how most college students choose to use their extra credits, but I had fun. I really enjoyed those classes. Um, some of the material
Yeah.
was gone over multiple times, kind of overlapped, and that just kind of helped reinforce it, helped me, uh, remember that even afterwards. But anyway, that's getting a little off topic. So yeah, college was where I first started to question some of the things that I'd been taught in even through high school. Um, and I don't know, it made me start to look for answers, and those led to questions that I hadn't even asked, popping up, and um, then you go looking for those answers, and it just it expands and expands,
Yeah.
to the point where I got to a point where I was like, well, I certainly can't believe that the Bible is this 100% accurate book that that's what I've been taught growing up.
Hmm.
Can't believe that that's 100% accurate, but maybe that was just the wrong way to look at it. So looked at it a few other ways, started looking at other religions. None of them really made sense, but I hesitated to call myself an atheist because it seemed like a really dirty word. Um, but in kind of exploring the atheist community that's out there, um, I saw that that was a big problem. Was that most people have this extremely negative view of anyone who says that they're an atheist. And I was like, I know a lot of them. Like, I know several atheists, and they're just as nice as anyone else. Why is this such a bad word?
Right.
So I think that was a large part of me making my coming out video, was just saying, hey, you know, I'm an atheist, just so that you know that we're, you know, not these Satan worshipping, fake sacrificing monsters. We're just normal people who just answer no to the question, do you think that there's a God? So, and I'm hoping that, you know, these videos can help bridge the gap between atheists and family members or friends that just don't get it, and you know, just kind of improve those relationships. My goal really hasn't ever been to try to convince people. I mean, I hope that I can at least get people to start thinking about it, but my goal isn't to, you know, deconvert people. My goal is really just to, is just to educate people. So,
I think that's that's what I really like about your videos, is I think it brings it home that normal everyday people, like, you don't have to do this for a living to turn on the brain, think some things through. Don't take things for granted. Don't just believe what your parents believed. Don't believe what, you know, necessarily any one person believes. It's nice to kind of turn on your brain for a while, and as an adult, think about these big questions, like, because, you know, they're kind of important. It's kind of, whether or not you realize it, your worldview, your thought on the way the world works and who you are and what your purpose is or whatever, that affects how you operate. That affects your relationships. That affects, you know, what you do, how you tick. So, you know, it's nice to at least know that, okay, I've given this kind of important stuff some thought. I'm not constantly just thinking about what I'm going to have for dinner, or who I'm dating, or, you know, what movies I want to see this weekend, or, you know, how much money I'm making right now. There's some bigger stuff out there. Then it's nice that, you know, some people out there actually give us some thought. I don't know, just quickly, as we're starting to delve into some of these topics, why is it, as I'm sure you've done some research, why does it seem like there's a lot of guys out there who do it, and I don't see a lot of girls? Is it that the girls just are humble enough to think that not every single person in the world wants to hear their opinion, and they're just more like smooth about it? Because maybe in your circles, like, maybe there's more diversity. It seems like across the board, when you get into some of the philosophical stuff or metaphysics or battle of sciences and perspectives, that it seems to be very heavy on especially young males, right? I feel like a lot of the guys who get into it, it's not like they're having a crisis when they're in their 40s. A lot of guys kind of like go through what you did, where you get in your formative years and not everything adds up, or you find your own thing, or you have a crisis, and then you like, okay, start to ask questions, and you start to really get a passion for this, get a bug for it.
I don't really know. I feel like, since I'm a part of the community, I see a little bit more than maybe the average person does. I mean, right now, probably one of the biggest YouTubers who blogs about, you know, the topics of atheism and secular humanism, you know, and, you know, morality and all that kind of stuff. From this perspective, is Jacqueline Glenn. I would be surprised if you hadn't heard of her, if you're at all interested in apologetics or just, you know, YouTube talking about this kind of thing. So one of the biggest voices is a woman. Now, I don't have any idea what the statistics are as far as the, you know, male to female breakdown and who's talking about this, or the demographics of, you know, who checks the box, you know, none on, you know, religion. So I don't have any idea. But I don't know. I mean, I've got several close female friends who are atheists, and who are active in the Secular Student Alliance at Georgia Southern. Really? I mean, when I was attending there, I would say it was disproportionately male, but it was not by much.
Oh,
So I don't really know. Can't really say. Granted, it's an extremely small sample size, so
right. Yeah.
we're looking at maybe 20 people at the highest. But still, I mean, they were willing to take a couple hours out of one of their weekdays to come and meet and talk about it. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know what the demographics are. Like I said, and Jacqueline Glenn's probably the most prominent one that I could think of, but Rachel Oates is a YouTuber from Great Britain who talks about this kind of stuff too. So it's not an exclusive platform even in the atheist community. There are certainly a lot more. It seems like there are certainly a lot more guys talking about it, but I don't know if that's the result of anything or if it's just guys like to talk to a camera.
Right.
I don't know what it could be.
Yeah, I just want to get your perspective on that. That's good to know. I'll have to look into those ladies and check out their channels.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I've when I was first getting into the question of like, well, if I don't believe in anything, like, what does that make me? And
right.
What kind of question? Because I mean, of course, I had a lot of questions about kind of the big questions in life, like what does it mean to be without a religion? Like, obviously, I think I don't believe in anything supernatural, so what is all the systems of morality, of course, were based on the Bible, or well, the one that I was familiar with was based on the Bible, and so I started looking at some different people's answers to those questions. There's the question, is it possible to have an objective morality without there being a God, or is it possible for there to be an objective morality at all? And those kinds of questions. I've read Sam Harris's book, The Moral Landscape, which is it's a dense read, but I recommend it for anyone that's got questions on how you can be moral and not believe in a higher power. I don't know that I could agree with his premise that this system of morality that he's presenting is a possibility. It could be objective, unless he's. I mean, the way that I look at objective is outside of human, outside of the human sphere. So it has to be something that's true, whether or not we're thinking about it. And since we are the kind of the reason that a morality exists at all, because we're the ones that act it out, and we are the ones that benefit or get hurt based on our choices. I don't think that you could say that morality could be objective, unless you just redefine the word objective, which you're totally welcome to do. I just going off of that definition, that's what I feel, and I feel like Sam Harris's definition of taking the worst possible universe where you've got a maximum amount of suffering for all conscious creatures all the time, versus a totally good universe where you've got the maximum possible pleasure all the time for all conscious creatures. Both of these, of course, are hypothetical, but saying that we exist somewhere between there, we should always strive to move towards one and away from the other, and there may not be one specific, peak in this landscape. There may not be one answer to all these questions. There may be multiple answers. But saying that science can get us closer to those by analyzing the brain and seeing what makes people happy and what harms us, and trying to find the best route to get there. That stuff I think has merit. And so if I could just give a book plug there for somebody, Sam Harris's book, The Moral Landscape. It's a good read if you're down to sit and ask these kinds of questions.
So you said you had concerns with the premise. In conclusion, just want to make sure I heard it. Do you believe in objective morality, or do you not, but you believe that through, biology or animal nature or whatever, that we can get to something that's very close to it, and you think that's what Sam Harris is trying to get at?
I think Sam Harris is trying to say that it is possible to have an objective morality outside of a belief in a God. But I don't see how that's possible because it's such a subjective concept, this idea of morality. So I can agree with him up to the point where he says that this is how we could get to an objective morality.
Meaning that it's authoritative, as if it would have any kind of, if party A disagrees with party B, you could point to what he's getting at and say, okay, well, this is the objective morality, and therefore A can prove that they are right and B is wrong. It's not that evident.
Yeah, I think that's what he's trying to get to. And my only qualm with it is calling that objective, because I think it's still subjective because it's dealing with humans. If there weren't any humans on the planet, is morality still a thing? I mean, you see evidence of empathy in the animal kingdom, which makes sense. I mean, we're evolved apes, and I think that we got our sense of morality from what helped our ancestors' societies to flourish. So, not killing people. That's a pretty easy one to get behind, I think. And that has obvious consequences to it. If you have a society where it's okay to kill people, that society will not survive very long. Versus a society where killing someone is punished, obviously that society is going to have more people in it because.
So you would say that murder being frowned upon, while you can't say that it's immoral, you would say it's pragmatic, and all the successful primates ancestors before us developed that, and it has increased more flourishing and more pleasure and minimized pain. Therefore, it's pragmatic to have that be a social norm and to try to mitigate it when you see other humans trying to kill people. Is that what you'd? I'm putting words in your mouth trying to understand. So maybe you could clarify for me and tell me how we get to that point.
Yeah. So the use of the word immoral. Just because I say that I don't think that there is an objective morality, doesn't mean that I don't think that morality exists. I definitely still think that morality is a thing. I just think that it's purely subjective. And we have to analyze it that way. I mean, I think that that's pretty clear that it's subjective because, if we had these objective moral laws, like don't kill people, would it have been right to kill Hitler? If we have an objective moral law, he is killing people by the millions. Is it morally wrong to kill Hitler? If we have a moral law that says it's wrong to kill anyone, then yes, we have a problem. So we have to look at these subjectively. But that doesn't mean that morality doesn't exist. I absolutely think that morality exists. It's just we have to examine it societally instead of trying to figure out which, I don't know, for example, which holy book got it right.
Right. Well, I mean,
so
my
that's
perspective on here's the way I've learned to think about it in terms of morality. So there's category A that believes there is such a thing as morality and ethics, and then there's the category of people who don't believe that there is any true, like, because obviously that I think that if you start talking in terms of morality, we're getting to the metaphysical. So there are people say, well, while this or that, increasing pleasure, minimizing pain, there's not actually a thing called morality that is outside the material, natural world. And then so that I feel like there's different ways you can nuance there is no morality category. I think on there is a morality category. I find that there's probably three different classes that people will put themselves in. One is relative, where they truly do believe there's such a thing as good and evil. They believe there's such a thing as a moral law, but it is an autonomous kind of morality. Like, I have my own set of codes. This works for me. That works for Drew. That works for other people. This is what I think is good, and that's what but obviously then we get into an issue, because then who gets to trump another person's moral code when we have a conflict, right? Then there's the heteronomous, I believe, morality structure, where either the powerful or the more holy than thou or the more evolved and intelligent few set the moral standard and the moral law and the moral codes for the masses, right? Because they're smarter, or they're wiser, or they're more righteous, or they're richer, and so they get to determine morality for everybody. Which I do feel like there are some cultures in the world and in history where that has occurred. And then, of course, there's the absolutely objective morality, where there's a foundation beyond what you would say human. It's completely metaphysical. It's completely supernatural standard, which is when we get into the God. And I think that the assertion of the theistic position is that you can have moral codes and systems outside of that one category within there is such a thing as morality. You can have the heteronomous morality or the autonomous morality, but there's no objective foundation that makes it authoritative and makes it to where, we can choose between right and wrong amongst 7 billion people, right? So that's where we get into the issue. And so it's always interesting to see because everybody's, a little different, it seems. And everybody wants to have their moral code, or even to have a different moral code and just only live up to it when they feel like it, and then call everybody else and judge everybody else by what they think is right or wrong. So the moral problem is a very interesting conversation between all the belief systems.
Yeah, it is, and I see it as more evidence that morality is subjective, and as such, it has evolved as societies have evolved. I mean, you see now slavery is virtually universally frowned upon and outlawed. Obviously, I agree with that. That makes sense. But I mean, even 250 years ago, that wasn't the case.
Right.
And the question there is, was it okay for them? Because they were in a different time, living under different conditions. I would say no, it was not okay. Now, did they know that it wasn't okay? Some of them, I'm sure, did. I'm sure that the slaves were not happy about it. So saying that, just because it was a different time, certain things should be allowed for, in the past. I don't agree with that. But did they have the tools with which to do something about it? I can't say.
So you believe that morality, because your explanation for the origins of morality was our primate ancestors learning that certain things increase flourishing and certain other behaviors and characteristics decrease flourishing. But I think that if we're going to approach morality from that perspective, that we can't really claim that morality is timeless. Morality would evolve just as all the animals would evolve then. So moral standards would change as we evolve. And so what's righteous or what's good today might be kind of gray area 1,000 years from now, might be horrible 1,000 years from now, or maybe 100 years from now. So I don't know. Maybe you could clarify that for me as how morality changes, or if there are certain moral principles or whatever we call morality to be timeless or to be self-evident or to be whatever.
Yeah. So obviously, I don't think that morality has always existed in its current form. I mean, that's pretty obvious that it hasn't. I think I'm working with a slightly bigger time scale, but I think that, generally, humans have had a capacity to ask these kinds of questions. The difference is the amount of knowledge that we had at the time. So one of the biggest arguments for slavery when it was being argued for even up into the Civil War was that that African Americans were a different race, an inferior race, and as such, it was okay to enslave them. With the theory of evolution showing us, hey, no, the human race is just one species. It's just, the idea that races exist is, that's a purely human invention. There's really no such thing as race until you get down to societies and traditions within groups. It's not a biological. It doesn't separate us as a species from other what we would call races.
Right.
Obviously there are allele differences and small genetic differences, but we are not separated from people of other races by nearly the amount that people used to think that we were. So I think part of it's just an expansion of our knowledge and being able to empathize with other people that has allowed our morality to grow. One of the big issues now is gay rights and transgender rights. And I don't know where you stand on any of this, but I support gay rights. I support transgender rights. I'm a proponent for the LGBTQ community. While I'm not a member of it, I still support the movement and I support equal rights. There are still some states in the U.S. today where acting on your own human nature is illegal.
You mean like sodomy laws?
Yeah, there's still sodomy laws in the U.S. Right. That's and so it's not an issue that we've completely gotten past even now. I think that we've made some pretty huge steps here, but we've still got a long way to go. And a lot of these stem from the belief that it is unnatural or immoral to act in this way or to love somebody of the same gender as you. That's just demonstrably false. I love the claim that homosexuality is unnatural, because unnatural would mean doesn't occur in nature. And if it occurs once, it's in nature. So if somebody, that claim in particular is pretty laughable. But even outside of the human species, you see it in all mammal species. It's everywhere. So clearly it wasn't, it's not an unnatural thing. And the thing that, the way that people say that it's wrong, it's against, the moral law that we've got, like that just completely baffles me that people think that way. I say that without letting you give your 2 cents on it. I'm curious to see what your thoughts are on that.
Well, something you raised a little bit earlier was, for example, like a couple hundred years ago, we were under the assumption that race was perfectly morally acceptable because, they're a different race to us, they must be inferior or whatever. Maybe they were made to serve and then the superior races were made to be served. And you mentioned how the theory of evolution kind of got us past that as far as understanding how evolution works and whatnot. Do you believe that the theory of evolution provides a basis for moral progress or the betterment of civilization and peoples?
Well, the theory of evolution just talks about how the species that are around now got here. Mm-hmm. So it's in its most basic form, it is things change a little bit from mm-hmm. generation to generation, and mm-hmm. some mutations happen that cause certain individuals to survive better and to reproduce better, and that's over long stretches of time, that's how you get speciation.
Right.
That's really it. I mean, we can see trends towards more empathetic animal species in that, but mm-hmm. trying to say that that the theory of evolution somehow gives us a moral code, I think that gets to a question or maybe a misconception that I've heard before, that this idea of evolution or survival of the fittest would make a good moral code. And I think that is quite clearly not the case. I mean, the idea that you're trying to find the best specimens of the human species and kill off everything else that is not being beneficial, I think that's obviously a horrible way to try to live.
Because I was just about to ask you about eugenics.
Yeah.
Because that's obviously one of the a lot of people went that way at the end of the 19th century, and in the 20th century, Margaret Sanger, Adolf Hitler, they obviously thought that, well, if us smart people could sterilize or exterminate all the crappy people who aren't, the fittest, and then we can promote the propagation and the procreation of the fittest. To Hitler, it was the Aryan race. To other people, it was different things. We can expedite the evolutionary process into a more prosperous, powerful, healthier human species. So it's good to hear you say that, because obviously the 20th century, which is the bloodiest century of the past 2,000 years, pretty terrible stuff. That was something that obviously some people took the principles of evolution and really ran with that idea. But I think that one of the great things about the abolition of slavery and then the civil rights movement is just to, kind of give props where props are due in terms of history, is a lot of the people in the North, right? And slavery was a big reason for the Civil War. I used to think different things, and being from the South, I guess, you don't want to think about your ancestors as being like bad people. And I don't know, I had ancestors on both sides of the conflict, but, the Civil War was absolutely about slavery, and there was absolutely a racism problem that just did not get addressed. And unfortunately, we had to fight the bloodiest war in United States history to end it. And it shouldn't have had to happen. We should have not had slavery from the beginning. But without going into an entire United States history lesson, that's the way it ended up. There were a lot of Christians running the Underground Railroad. There were a lot of Christians pointing back to the Declaration of Independence. All men are created equal by their God, and are endowed with certain inalienable rights by nature's God. We find these truths to be self-evident. And they kept on knocking on the door, and we had the line, I forget what it was called, and they tried to do the 3/4 clause, and it was interesting that when they purchased land, they really fought, or at least the people who were on the right side of the argument fought to prevent that. And then, of course, and the civil rights movement, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Reverend, kept them pointing back to the Constitution, pointing back to the Declaration of Independence, pointing back to God. And I believe he even once said that he was speaking with these racist white people who have plenty of religion. He says, it's not that you're too religious, it's that you're not following the religion you have. And so, I think that in terms of, eradicating racism and slavery, I do believe, even going back to the birth of the church, if you read some of Paul's letters about, although he says if you're a slave, to be obedient to your master, Christianity, in fact, there's writings about how Christianity affected Greco-Roman culture and really changed this polytheistic culture and really just completely got itself into trouble with how different it was, all the way until the abolition of slavery and the civil rights movement in the United States. I do think it would be nice if people gave props where it's due, although the Christian movement and Christendom certainly have its issues. That I do believe that was a crucial part of ending slavery. I'm sure that maybe some of the thoughts that came out of the Darwin's discoveries in the 19th century and our better understanding of evolution maybe helped that process, but I do think that Christianity certainly played a part in that.
Yeah, I mean, there's no question that there were people who fought for the abolition of slavery, because of their religion. That's patently obvious. I think maybe the problem with crediting that to Christianity is that it's very easy to make the argument that people on the other side of the fence were also using the same Bible to justify slavery. Exodus 21 details how hard you can beat your slave without being punished for it. It's and I think that's an argument that I hear a lot all the time. Pointing to that specific chapter in Exodus. But it's not the only place in the Bible that you can look to support your ideas of slavery or, but it can also be used the other way around. You can use it to justify altruistic behavior and, fighting for, a better society and loving people no matter what they believe or how they act, just try and treat people better. And I think this is a problem that a lot of people outside of religion see with religion, is that with these holy books, you get just a ton of material. Some of it can be interpreted to support whatever ideology you want to hold, and that's part of the danger. So that just seems like a kind of the easy argument to pick. Another one would be that it was, the 1800s in America. There weren't a lot of people who weren't religious, and in America, it's pretty much Christianity that held sway. So if this had taken place in China or in India, say, same kind of situation, you'd get people arguing for and against the same kind of idea, basing it on their belief in Buddha.
Right. But I don't think you automatically have the same results. I don't think you automatically have the same results, because obviously throughout all of history, different ideas that have held different prominence will obviously affect, all the stuff that starts in the schools and in universities is what everybody's doing 100-something years later. Honestly, even the atheistic movement, there's always been people who have not believed for all of history. I don't believe that atheists popped up out of nowhere, but obviously the prominence of atheism in modern scholarship, a lot of it came out of Europe in the 19th century, right? So you have guys like Marx and Nietzsche and Engels and Freud, and you have a lot of influential guys in the 19th century, the Romantic period, who then gained sway and they actually start to gain prominence. There's leaders of countries in the 20th century that now hold those beliefs, and then we've continued to go through the progression to where now you have the neo-atheists, where you have guys like Sam Harris, and you had Christopher Hitchens for a while, and you had Dawkins, obviously, where, that's a new breed of atheism. And as those different views hold sway, it affects cultures and how it acts. So I think that different things would play out differently, whether it means that ultimately, slavery would have been abolished. I just think that, we have to take everything within context. And not to say that if it had been a nation of atheists that, everything would have gone to hell or anything like that. I'm just saying that, it happened how it happened with the people that it happened with, their belief system that it happened with, and it has its own little piece. I did want to say one thing, if you don't mind, but I've been talking for a while, so I'm happy to shut up for a while. But something you said about the Bible, I hope that this is something in my journey that let me just say it this way. People, and I'm talking to Christians do not know the Bible. Christians don't know the Bible. In fact, you probably, after you left the faith and started to look and stuff, you probably know more about the Bible than you did when you were a Christian. Okay? Very few people.
I would say I certainly do, yeah.
Right. Very few people know the Bible. And I tell you what, I'm 27. I've been a Christian since I was 6. That's when I officially, unprompted, but I went down and I asked Jesus to become my Lord at 6 years old. Not obviously a lot of things you don't know, but I did it. From that point until last year, I had not read the Bible through once. Not read it through once.
Oh, wow.
It's the reason why people can, list something from Exodus or Leviticus or Deuteronomy, and you're just going to have it deer in the headlights look, because first of all, no one likes to read Leviticus or Deuteronomy. The only time that Christians do it is if, I don't even know, they just don't do it. And the only time atheists will do it if they're trying to look up something to that's going to weird people out. Because it's just there's nothing fun about reading the Torah, which are the first 5 books of the Bible. It's a tough read.
It is.
My ultimate point is that I read through the Bible for the first time last year, Genesis through Revelation. Did it for the first time ever, and I'm reading through it again at a much slower pace so I can really sink into it. The Bible is not, and you read the King James Version, and everybody knows of the Bible, and you grow up with the stories. I mean, my daughter upstairs has a little children's Bible. So we grow up saturated in what we think of the Bible, and we think we know it. People don't know jack squat about the Bible, okay? The Bible was not written during the time of King James in the 1600s. The Bible is not from America. The Bible is not from Great Britain. The Bible is not even from Greece. The Bible is thousands of years old. It's ancient Near Eastern Jewish meditation language. And even though as Christians we believe that it was written for us, it was not written to us. So I would just urge, and I'm not even saying that if you do this, this will happen, you'll have this perspective. I would just encourage, if people want to read the Bible and make claims about the Bible, and I would say to Christians just alike, there are a lot of false beliefs about Christianity that come from Christians and who will point to chapter and verse about what the Bible says it means. I would just read the Bible within context. Understand that you're reading something that was written in Hebrew or Koine Greek, not English, and it was not written to you, although it may be written for you, and you have to read this deep, dense 66 books. It's not even one book. It's 66 books written over thousands of years of history. Read it for what it is. If it was intended to be narrative and history, read it as that. If it was intended to be poetry, read it as that. If it was intended to be symbolism, read it as that. If it was intended to be prose discourse, read it as that. And so that's just something that for everybody who's in their journey who wants to have an opinion about the Bible. I now, after reading the Bible once, I'm not even going to claim that I know the Bible. I feel like I've gone from unconscious incompetence to conscious incompetence. Now I just know how much I don't know about the Bible. And now I'm trying to work my way. Hopefully over the next 10 years, I'll have read the Bible a lot more than I did as a young guy. And if you had asked me 50 questions that you would think to ask a Christian when I was in college, when we were in 2009, 2010, and you ask me now, you would get a lot of different answers. I'm not saying that Christians have no reason, Christians don't know anything about the Bible. Christians know the basics, that Jesus died for them, they rose from the dead, that he's God, and that they're a sinner and that they need him, like the basic stuff of the ABCs of confession. But they don't know much more than that. And I would encourage people, because the Bible's weird and the Bible's doesn't make a lot of sense because we're 21st century people and it doesn't read like any of the other books we have. So that's just my 2 cents. If people want to learn the Bible for whatever purposes they have, if you just want to read it as material, as history, or if you want to read it to understand why these Christians believe it, they do, and have good arguments to show why there's discrepancies or there's contradictions or there's outright errors. Or if they want to read it to be a better Christian, I would just take time to actually read the thing and try to understand it, to read commentaries to figure out like what the thing really is all about.
Yeah, I'm going to 100% agree with you on that. Definitely think that you should read the Bible, whether you're a Christian wholeheartedly or whether you're starting to have some doubts or whether you don't believe a word of it. It's I think an important thing to read, just to set yourself in modern society, just to say that so that you can know what's in there.
Yeah, it's the best-selling book of all time. If you just want to look at the cultural and historical impact, even if you just want to read it for academic purposes, certainly there are some books that are much harder to read, like Pulling Teeth, and there's other ones that it could be quite interesting. So, maybe you can find what works for you.
Yeah, I mean, it's a book that has influenced art and poetry and music for, hundreds and thousands of years, in some way, shape, or form. Growing up, it was always referred to as the good book. You'll still hear that a lot. It's a pretty boring book for the vast majority of it. So I grew up reading things like The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings and Chronicles of Narnia and stuff like that. I was like, yeah, these are great. And I get to the Bible and I'm like, boy, Genesis was interesting, but Exodus is aside from the couple of stories that it's pretty boring. You get I'm working on the script for a video right now, which deals with the Ten Commandments, kind of the story that everyone thinks that they know. How well do you actually know it, kind of thing. So, spoiler alert if this comes out before that video does. There's the original, the first set of the Ten Commandments that everyone knows, and then in between that and Moses coming down the mountain and breaking the tablets, there's a ton of other stuff. There's like 4 chapters in between. No, there's far more than that. There are between okay. He comes down and breaks it, chapter 24, I think. So there's chapter 26. I'm not exactly sure the numbers, but they'll be accurate in the video. Basically, there's descriptions of the exact dimensions of the Ark of the Covenant, and that takes up a chapter. There's descriptions of the dimensions that the temple needs to be, and what the curtains need to be made of, and what they need to look like, and their thicknesses, and what the priests should wear, and how to consecrate them. That is not very engaging reading.
No, it's funny you say that. I've tried to read through the Bible many times, and I do what most people do. You go cover to cover, right? So you get through Genesis, and you get through the Exodus, part of Exodus, and then some people will be tough and they'll fight it out to get to the end of Exodus, but then Leviticus, you're done. You're just done. Yeah. There's no way you make it through Leviticus.
Yeah, the fact that it's organized the way that it is, I think is a problem. Is probably a large part of why people don't read it all the way through.
Yeah,
because you've got some of the most boring. This man begat this man begat this man begat this man for chapters on end. Do you read that? Do you really need to read that, or can you just skim it?
I think that there's some cool stuff, and so I've come to know a lot of Jews. So I understand the atheist position to a degree. I've never done research to I should really, really, really research the atheist position. But I do know of the atheist position. To your own admonition, it's the lack of a belief, right? So it's not like it's uber complex stuff, at least from your perspective. You don't have a belief. You don't have sufficient evidence to have a belief or whatever. And I don't know much about Islam. I know even less about Buddhism and Hinduism and the pantheistic religions, but I do know a good bit about Judaism. And I find that if you find the right material, actually my source is to learn about the Torah or the Pentateuch or the first 5 books of the Bible or the laws of Moses, a lot of different names for them. It's really crucial stuff. I actually think, especially if you read the book of Matthew, which is a gospel that Matthew wrote specifically trying to compel the Jews at that time. It's like it references the most Old Testament prophecies. Like you could tell different ones have different emphases.
You can tell that Matthew was certainly written by a member of the Jewish community. Yeah.
Right. And actually, his Jewish name is Levi. His Greek name is Matthew, and he was trying to write that one specifically for the Jews. But then, like, you really can't appreciate what the Bible is trying to get at, because there's the Torah, first 5 books, and then a lot of the prophets and a lot of stuff after that is how they don't live up to the Torah and how all these different prophets are trying to point them back to the Torah. And then you have the New Testament where Jesus said he's fulfilling the Torah, and then you have all the imagery about how Jesus really does do that. And so, like, that, I would say that for most Christians or people who want to read the Bible, like, work your way maybe front to back, like maybe start with the Gospel of John is what people always say, and then read the Gospels, and then read the New Testament, and then go back, and it'll maybe, like, at least give you more motivation to try to painfully go through it. But there are people who have come up with good ways, and without plugging other channels, there are channels I found that can bring it down to the 21st century American or Westerner and help you understand why the heck I should bother reading numbers. Because seriously, like, no one's going to go out of the way to read numbers.
Yeah, it's not high on the recommendation list from the Bible for sure.
I'd much rather read the moral landscape if I'm just going to find a good read. I mean, good, come on. But there is a reason for it. And, like, once again, it's ancient Near Eastern meditation writings, which were written for Jews thousands of years ago. So it's not written to you. Christians believe it's written for us, and so you really have to, you got to prepare yourself for that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Just to wrap that up a little bit, definitely suggest that, anyone who thinks that they should read the Bible definitely should read the Bible all the way through. I mean, you'll hear all the time that, people ask atheists, what was the number one book that helped you stop believing in God? And everyone's always like, oh, it's the Bible. It's like, okay, that may be true, but it is interesting for more than just, the trying to treat it as something that actually happened. I mean, because, the stories in it are really neat. I don't think most of it happened, but and I think that a lot of problems that we run into is people try to treat the stories in the Bible as actually having happened in the past, and you run into the question, well, where do we draw the line between this is an allegory and this is a historical event? And the line has been moving for the thousands of years that the Bible has been around. So, it's I think probably a tough question for a lot of theists to answer. Fortunately, I have an easy answer. I don't care where you draw the line in the Bible, because I don't think that that's where our morality needs to come from anyway. I think that, as a global society now, especially since the invention of the internet, I mean, the fact that I can pick up my phone and contact somebody on the other side of the world and learn about their life and their society, just, flipping through pages on my phone, helps us to empathize with people that we otherwise would never have even known existed. So I think globally that is making us a much more accepting society. And I think that that's clearly for the better. So, I mean, that it's not without its flaws for sure. I mean, there's some pretty obvious ones, the fact that it's very easy to spread something that is, false, either demonstrably or at least in part, and have a lot of people believe it just because they saw it somewhere. Whereas, older societies, you had the newspapers and you were only given your information through these sources. Now I could make up something, post it on the internet, and somebody would believe it somewhere. It's a lot easier to spread false information now, I think, than it was a long time ago. And
I think there's quite an irony there that in the information revolution where we have more information at our fingertips than could have ever been imagined 50 years ago, that obviously I still believe, I think there's a misnomer that the majority of college students and young people, millennials, are postmodernists. I think that still to this day that the majority of young people and maybe, a lot of people are modernists, getting to the philosophy part of it. But postmodernism is the kind of the new thought on the block. And it's funny that postmodernism doesn't believe in truth. And I think I've seen different polls. I'm not a statistician or an expert, but you have more young people just not knowing truth and not knowing where to find truth and not having answers and having a crisis of identity and of their existence. When in the information age with the internet, we have more information at our fingertips than ever. So I think it's interesting some of those positions we find ourselves in as society, despite the saturation of information, perhaps an oversaturation of information.
Yeah, I'm happy that information is readily available. The problem is we have to learn as a society how to vet that information. It's too easy to see an article thumbnail on Facebook, and I mean, you don't even have to click on the article, and you'll share it or you'll comment, "Oh, this is so great." It's like, you haven't even read the article. You don't even know what they're talking about. Like, this could be just clickbait. And so I think we have to learn how to vet the information that we have, because we have so much more of it now than we used to. So much more easy access to it that we have to learn how to sift through it and find out what is demonstrably true and what is clearly not. And we're not there yet, but I'm hoping that we can get there.
Well, I think another issue with the internet, from my perspective, is social media. What you've seen was how much crap the social media giants are going through right now in the press. Is that I think that it's gone from something that was really cool. I mean, you and I both remember when MySpace and Facebook and Twitter came out. Like, we saw the revolution of that stuff. But I feel like people are more closed-minded than ever. I feel like they don't see the people on the other side of that tweet or on the other side of that Facebook post. And so I feel like people are just more cold, and people don't have the relationships they used to. I think it was like some old guy over in Illinois got found like dead like 2 years after he had died or something like that. Like, relationships and human interaction skill and open-mindedness. Like, I don't know. I feel like that, a lot of stuff is a blessing and a curse. The Industrial Revolution was great, but it caused a lot of, pollution, and we had to start putting in child labor laws and stuff. And, college was great, but now no one wants to know a trade, and, everybody wants to go get a degree in whatever and then, not do anything with themselves. And I think the same thing is with the internet. I think there's been a lot of good about the internet, and I think there's been a lot of bad stuff that, we'll have to see 50 years down the line. We're only 20 years in this thing? Not even. It'll be interesting to see how society's different right at the time you and I, assuming we both live a long time, go to die, how much different it really is. Because it's had some great, I love it, dude. I mean, YouTube, I am all over me some YouTube. Like, most of how I learned how I'm able to have some of these conversations with a smart guy like you is YouTube. I don't have time to sit down and read books. Okay, I'm telling you. A lot of how I've learned about philosophy and science and apologetics, the Bible. Like, I went to school like you. I still enjoy pulling open a book, except I don't have time now. I'm all over the internet, but I do see some really dangerous consequences, and there's always a challenge for every generation. I see there being a lot of issues right now, and I'm kind of scared at where, society's headed in terms of our ability to treat each other like humans and with respect, and to actually open up our minds and have conversations like what you and I are having. We disagree about how the world exists and works, but we both can treat each other with respect and be friends and talk about Batman and Georgia Southern once we get finished telling each other that each other is wrong about the biggest questions in all of existence. And people just can't do that these days. So, it's an interesting time. It's a scary time.
Yeah, maybe I'm a little bit more optimistic about it. I mean, certainly
you're not a parent yet.
Well, I don't think that's a path I'll ever walk. I may need to edit that part out so that my parents don't get depressed by that. But yeah, I don't know. I don't think kids are in my future. At least I'm not planning on it. But
You become much more of a cynic. That's all I'm saying.
well, I mean, people accuse me of cynicism already, so maybe maybe I don't need that. But I mean,
if you're an
I don't know.
atheist, if you're an atheist, you have to be somewhat of a cynicist, right?
I guess. I mean, that's
You have to be a happy-go-lucky guy, right?
Isn't that the rule? Yeah. If you don't believe that a God exists, then you're just
I'm
a
stereotyping. I don't know.
Depressed person. No, I mean, I think I think I'm pretty happy.
Yeah.
But you know, going back to the age of technology that we're in right now, I think that it's going to be one of those things that we have to figure out. Because yes, there are trolls on the internet. How do you deal with an internet troll? Well, don't engage with them. As soon as you engage with them, they've won. Right. And I think once enough people realize, like, you know, they learn how to sift through comments on their posts and see, you know, I mean, as soon as you sift all that out, you'll get to some reasonable questions or comments. But we have to learn how to sift through all that stuff. How, you know, when to take somebody's comment seriously and when to just throw it away. When to look at an article and say, all right, well, this looks, you know, peer reviewed, and there's a lot of people that are, you know, supporting this idea. All right, this seems to be true. Or you look at another article and you say, all right, well, the sample size is tiny. The conclusions they draw don't seem to make much sense. They didn't get any peer review. This test hasn't been repeated. Like, okay, this is something I can toss away. That's a more high level, you know, thing to do. A step or two below that is just when you see an article on Facebook and you're like, oh, this is awesome. Read the article and then if you know, go one step further than that and see where their sources come from. And if they're vetted sources, then great. Then that's something that you can take seriously. But you know, just seeing something pop up real quick and, you know, that's something that we have to learn how to get past, is just seeing and then immediately, you know, thinking that something's true.
Well, can I ask you a question about that?
Yeah, sure.
So you talked about, like, okay, so when we're sifting through the news, that's great. One of the things my dad was, I think, he had a good instincts on was the media. Because right now, everybody's like, oh, the media's corrupt, the media's corrupt, the media's corrupt. No matter where you are, like, everybody's just like, and to a degree where you can just use it as an excuse to just, like, stay in your own little box and confirmation bias and all that stuff. But my dad always taught me that everybody is a human. You know, everybody to a degree has an agenda. Some people are more objective and have more principles in the way they do their job than others. But he always taught me to just, you know, read multiple sources, and different humans, even if they don't mean to push us and frame something a certain way, people just naturally will notice things more than others will. And so he taught me, you know, if you really want to get the news down and you want to be objective, is to read multiple sources, get some TV here, some newspaper there, some radio there, whatever. And then within all that, you'll see common threads and you can see contradictions, and you can kind of draw your own logical conclusion using your common sense. And then, of course, learning how to think. So, you know, on that point with you, and so my question is, when a skeptic, because you call yourself an atheist, and you really gave a good illustration of the difference between an agnostic person and an atheist person. I've heard a lot of people who will outright reject the term atheist because they don't like some of the implication, the stereotypes that are associated with that, because they believe that, oh, well, that would infer that I believe there is no God. I've heard a lot of people substitute with the term skeptic, meaning that I don't have sufficient evidence to hold a belief on there being a God. I don't have compelling evidence to make that leap of faith or whatever. So you kind of demonstrated on how, like, when you're going through Facebook, how you use your instincts and make logical inferences based off of your critical thinking and your instincts to determine what you are going to trust as being, evidence-based or whatever, being trustworthy, and okay, I can reasonably assume that that person gave me the news for the day, whereas this person did not. When you're getting into the really, really, really big questions of origin, meaning, morality, and destiny, how is your approach and what is your standard for what you say, okay, I'm going to say that this is true because I can 100% verify it or confirm it? Or do you leave room for uncertainty in that you find it highly probable, although you can't absolutely confirm it to be the absolute truth, and you feel like that is within the realm of how a skeptic can honestly and consistently live, is make logical inferences and deal in probabilities? Or does a skeptic have to absolutely no, and there's no room for questions in order for him to say, I believe or I know this to be true?
That's a great question. I think that it very basically comes down to the name or the word skeptic. I don't take anything as 100% because I'm of the opinion that no idea should go unchallenged, even ones that I hold. Ones that I think are good ideas. Even those should be challenged. And I think we should challenge the ones that we hold as much, if not more, than the ones that we don't hold. Because, if I could recommend a video from Cosmic Skeptic, he just a week or two ago uploaded a talk that he gave out in California. I want to say the video is called "Why Smart People Believe Silly Things," and it is one of my favorite videos of his that I've done. I'll put the link in the description on this video, and I'll link all of the channels and whatnot that I've mentioned, or links to books that I've mentioned in here as well. But in that video in particular, he talks about good and bad ideas and why we should criticize good ideas more than we criticize bad ideas. And it's because you only believe good ideas. You only hold good ideas. If you recognize that something is a bad idea, you don't believe it anymore. Like if I thought something was wrong in my belief, I wouldn't believe it anymore. Like that's not how beliefs work. So this idea of criticizing a good idea as much as you criticize a bad idea, if not more, I think is a good way to live. Now, the ones that hold up to that kind of scrutiny are the ones that we hold on to. Right. And when you apply that to this question of when we're dealing with something like the news media, what do I take as absolute fact? Well, I mean, if I'm watching The Late Show with Stephen Colbert, he quite clearly has a very left slant in his shows. So if I watch that, I know, all right, this is going to be pointedly left. And if I watch something from Fox News, that is going to be very pointedly right. Right wing, not correct. Just to point that out there.
To the right side of the aisle.
Yes, to the right side of the aisle. And sometimes the truth lies somewhere in the middle. Sometimes it lies closer to one end of the spectrum than the other. But I agree with you that you should view multiple sources. And don't ever. The danger is to only ever watch one news source, and because then you're just going to believe whatever they tell you. I mean, if all I were to watch was The Late Show with Stephen Colbert, I would never hear any of the counter arguments to some of the things that he puts on there. Or I would hear only, heavily edited footage of whatever issue it is that he's talking about. Whereas if I go and watch Fox News, I'll hear either a different clip or put it into a different context or, something like that. And it helps to view an idea from multiple angles, and multiple sources for your news is a good way to do that. I mean, even looking at some of the more ridiculous ones, like Alex Jones, with was it InfoWars. You can watch that just to help you know that people out there believe some of the crazy stuff he says.
Yeah.
So look at everything as much as you can take in and do your best to sift through it and see, okay, well, this is obviously made up, or this may have a kernel of truth to it. And then ultimately, when we get to the big questions, you've developed a way to sift through the information, and you know kind of where to go to get it. The best thing when you're presented with a new question, and I think this is something that I'm plagiarizing from Cosmic Skeptic, but sorry, it's a good idea. The first time you're presented with an idea, immediately bring it into question. Don't just take it as true. Immediately try to think of reasons that idea is not could not be true. Just ways in which that could not be true. And then go and see if you can find a debate on that topic between two people who are credentialed in their fields, and see the argument from both sides, from the proponent and from the person that's attacking the idea, and go and watch talks. Just long lectures of people. Hear what questions the audience has. I drive a lot for work, and I listen to a lot of podcasts, or just, I'll put on a YouTube video of a debate or something while I'm driving. Because as much as I obviously love music, I can't just listen to albums while I'm on, while I do a 2-hour trip one way and a 2-hour trip back,
Podcasts
once a
are
week,
awesome. That's awesome.
Every day. So podcasts, YouTube debates, I am fortunate enough to have unlimited data, so I can pull up a YouTube video while driving, and as long as I've got cell service, then I'm good.
Awesome.
Just examine every idea, especially ones that you hold near and dear. Examine it from every possible angle you can. Look for people that are talking about this or have talked about this. Look for people with opposing viewpoints and see what they have to say about it. Because I want to believe, what's true, what's demonstrably true. And the only way to do that is to see what kind of questions people are asking out there and how people answer them. That helps shape how we think. And with the advent of the internet and with YouTube, it's very easy to find the resources out there that'll help you answer a lot of questions that may be had on these topics. So,
and do you feel like if you go through that process in search of truth, because you mentioned truth, so you're in search of truth, do you believe that as a skeptic with the skeptic mentality, you can reach a point with some really big issues to where you can reach a point where you don't have all the information and can't answer every objection, but you have enough evidence, sufficient evidence to claim that opinion, hold that opinion, have that belief, and you feel like you can do that without having every single question answered? You've done your research, you have sufficient evidence, or you're dealing in the probabilities, so you're 70% or 80%, however you quantify it, and therefore you feel comfortable in saying, well, yeah, this is how this happened, or this is the way this works.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be silly for me to try and say that I don't have any beliefs. I mean, obviously, I believe that the Earth is round, is a sphere. I mean, I say round. Right. That the Earth is a sphere. I believe that there's other galaxies that exist, and that light from those galaxies took millions of years to get to our planet and to our eyes, and that means that those galaxies, what we're seeing from those galaxies, is millions of years old. I would say that I am as as close to 100% certain as I could possibly be that that's the case. But if I were to go that extra step on any topic and say that I'm 100% sure, then that's just that's opening the doors for believing something that may not be demonstrably true. I mean, it would take a lot to convince me that that's not the case. You know, I mean, that may have been a bad example, but
no, good.
But I mean, saying that you're 100% sure that something happened, you know, leaving no room for questioning, just, you know, shuts you off from a lot of potential information out there. I mean, if I had stayed 100% certain that evolution didn't happen, I don't know. I think one of the most beautiful things to think about is that, you know, because of the theory of evolution, what that has shown about us is that I'm related not only to every other member of the human species, but I'm related to every other living thing on this planet. You know, I'm related quite distantly, but I'm related to the grass that's in my yard. I'm related to the trees in England. You know, you know, all of life on this planet, at least, seems very, very likely that it is all connected, and that's just amazing to think about. And that's something that wouldn't have happened if I'd been completely closed off to the idea that I could have, you know, that I could have been wrong about something. So I can't say that I hold very many ideas with 100% certainty. But I would say that trying to live life as though I didn't believe anything any of the time, that's an equally preposterous position to try and hold. So I would say the beliefs that I hold, I try my best to make sure that they are as close to being in line with what is demonstrably part of reality as I can. And that's not something that I think you ever really get done with. Like, it's not something that I'm gonna stop doing. Even with some of the questions that I hold, or that I think I've answered or have come to at least a close, I've come close to the answer. And I mean, another point to make is I'm a musician. I'm a career musician. I am not a biologist. I am not an astronomer. I am not a neuroscientist.
We got to pay the bills.
there are people who are experts in those fields that know these things a lot better than I ever will or have any interest in getting to. Even though I find those fields fascinating, there's a limit to my fascination.
And not even those guys know everything. I mean, like, you know, exactly. Everybody's gonna die without having all the answers. You know, spoiler alert.
Right. Yeah. I don't claim to have all the answers. And I don't think any one person in any of those fields would claim to have all the information, even that there is already discovered in those fields. Much less, I mean, a big part of earning, you know, postgraduate degrees is research. Like, people are constantly exploring more into these fields. So, I mean, the knowledge is always coming in, and in order to, I think, live the best life you can, you have to spend time trying to learn as much as you can. I don't think you should ever stop learning. And I'm glad that college taught me a lot of good ways to go about finding the information that I wanted to find. So I'm very, very glad that I did that. But it is now approaching the 1.5 hour mark on this video.
That's what happens when you're having fun.
Yeah, so I guess we should probably try to wrap it up. I mean, I know that we could go on and have this talk for hours and hours, but you've got kids and I've got to work in the morning, so we'll try and
Oh,
wrap
I got to
things
work
up.
tomorrow. I got the hurricane
Yeah.
thing coming down the pipe for where I work, but I still got to work tomorrow.
Yeah. Anyway, so just to wrap up, I mean, is there anywhere that we could find you, or do you want this to just be kind of a you're on my platform kind of thing? Is
Yeah,
there?
I don't have a dedicated page to the big questions like the Bearded Heathen would. I would just encourage people to subscribe to the Bearded Heathen. I mean, you can find me on Twitter. My personal Twitter account is I believe it's Philip Eagle at Philip Eagle. If you want me to, I can send it to you later. And if you want to put it in the link, if people want to follow me, be prepared to get tweets about a little bit about everything. I tweet about Atlanta Falcons just as much as I tweet about anything, and I tweet about politics. But if people want to get my perspective, maybe that'd be the best way to contact me is to maybe tweet me.
Okay.
But I would encourage everybody to subscribe to Bearded Heathen. I agree with Drew. Get out there. Always ask questions. I think that for whatever belief you have, we all have beliefs. Make sure they're evidence-based beliefs. Make sure you do your homework. Don't be closed-minded. And like you said, in the age of the internet, there's no excuse. It's all out there. You just got to go find it and start digging.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I agree. Well, cool. Well, I will put your link in the description as well. And I mean, I feel like there's certainly plenty more that we can talk about. Maybe we'll set something else up in the future and we can have some more talks like this. And we'll go from there. But yeah, as always, you guys can find me here on the Bearded Heathen. You can check out my Facebook page. Right now, all I do is link the videos that are on my YouTube, but I do plan to post articles and have conversations more on the Facebook side of things. So yeah, let me know if you'd like to see more of these, and I will see you guys in the next one.